Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. I am, as always, not Carl, and I am, as sometimes, not talking to you about firearms today. But that's common for those of you on the channel, right? We get into other topics. In fact, his most recent Q&A, right? Someone asked, hey Carl, do you ever touch on more infosec stuff for us, especially with everything going on in the world, digital footprint, security, etc., etc.? And those of you who do follow his work in other avenues especially know that encryption, privacy rights, online anonymity, never far from the topic when he's talking with like Robert Evans and so forth. He does touch on this there, but since just this very morning, I was chatting back and forth with a good friend of mine. She runs the group Armed Equality. If you don't know who they are, definitely check out AE. And we were talking about kind of the pain point of getting, we'll call them not non-technical people, but everyday people in our lives, getting them to use encryption, and specifically tools like Signal. A lot of us, I mean, how many times do you hear the hacker refrain, right? Use Signal, use Tor. And there's different degrees of ease on that, like using Tor effectively. It's gotten better, but it's still not an everyday thing. But Signal really is. And the conversation turned to the fact that some people don't, believe in it, or there's so much information out there like, well, I use WhatsApp, isn't that just as good? Or I heard everything's actually secretly broken by the FBI and it doesn't matter, it's all fake. So I wanted to make a quick example video. Literally, we're going to talk about a couple of example situations in which Signal is better than a conventional phone call or text message. So before we talk about why Signal is great, there are times when it's not. There are times when anything you're using is not the right tool for the job, or anything can fail with enough effort and dedication or bad luck, right? If you have, I'm a safe technician, if you have a giant safe and vault installation because you're protecting something super valuable, an adversary with enough time and money and resources and effort, they're going to get through it. But let's talk about what specific cases where Signal might not protect you more than a regular phone call would. And they're really obvious cases, and they're not unique. It's not like Signal's bad because of these failings. It's a failing across the board. For example, if you're talking to someone who is not a trusted party, right? If someone's going to rat you out, it doesn't really matter if you're talking to them over Signal or talking to them over a text message or like walking around just around town talking to them. Because that's honestly, and if you don't know a lot of people who talk about OPSEC in depth, the most secure method of communicating with someone to this day really is an in-person conversation in a controlled environment. Like if you go for a walk in the woods and you're pretty sure no one's around and you're pretty sure there's no tech around, you left all your tech at home, like that's about the most secure way to talk. But even that doesn't matter if the person you're talking to is not trustworthy. Like they could be secretly recording you. And likewise, if you're using Signal with someone who's not a trusted person or someone who just doesn't really like you and is lying to you, like sure, they could be screenshotting it. They could be showing the phone like to the cops or to your angry ex and, showing them like, well, this is what they're up to now. Here's who they're dating. Go yell at them in a Chili's restaurant or something. So of course, if the other person on the other end of that call or that chat is not trustworthy, Signal's not helping you, but then again, nothing else is. And what's the other main scenario in which Signal doesn't protect you? Well, it's if somebody you're talking to is trustworthy, but they actually have the device like ripped out of their hands. So the chat session is open and unlocked. They are actively like engaged in conversation with you and someone swipes the device. Again, this is not a problem unique to Signal. There's virtually no device out there that's going to protect you if someone grabs it while it's unlocked. The same thing holds true for your email and your laptop and everything else. There's no protection if it's unlocked and actively being used. That's an edge case. How do you guard against it? Well, you don't walk around with your phone just randomly unlocked. You lock it when you put it down. You use a phone that will automatically time out and lock itself. You use a phone, if you can, with your biometrics and your other wearables, that if it gets separated from you, the device goes into lockdown mode. There are ways to guard against that, but ultimately, if someone grabs it out of your friend's hands or your own hands, Signal won't protect you, but nothing else will either. Well, if those are the scenarios where Signal can't protect you, but then again, nothing else can either, are there other scenarios where Signal can protect you from threats in a way that your regular phone calls or texts cannot? Absolutely. First and foremost, straight up interception. It is not just feasible, pretty much since the beginning of phone calls, it has been mandatory in the past 3 decades or so for law enforcement to be able to intercept regular phone calls. It is under the law. They have to have a provision under all phone networks to reach in and tap in and listen to calls. This is whether you're using a landline, a cell phone, you name it. Signal is not a phone service provider, though, right? Signal does not have to comply with CALIA, that's the law under which this stipulation exists, because Signal is not a phone network. Signal is a communication app. And this works for text, it works for voice chats, it works for video calls. I've been using Signal way back when it was Red Phone and Text Secure. It was separate apps. And that's the whole reason people got into these sort of encrypted communication clients, because they're not susceptible to the biggest risk, which is straight up state-level interception. Or if you want to, you could say private party interception, because again, if you're on a private phone network or a Wi-Fi network, I mean, any sort of communication you're doing that can be sniffed by somebody who's getting those bits in the stream could be opened up and listened to unless it's encrypted properly. Another thing that Signal can do is help you verify who you're actually talking to. If you're dealing with just a regular cell phone call or an SMS text message, you don't really know if the device at the other end is the same device you were contacting yesterday or a week before. Some of you have heard of SIM card swapping attacks or other tools that exist at the sort of state actor level. If someone says, oh, let's intercept those texts, let's spin up a new device, let's mirror, like let's get another SIM card and then just pivot the number over there, port the number to that device, and we'll get all their texts. We can get really in the weeds, we don't have to in this video, about safety numbers, and if somebody spins up a new device, you may have seen this if you use Signal, right? It says, hey, this safety number has changed. You should take some extra steps to verify who you're really talking to. Regular SMS messages can't do that for you. But then here's the real big one, right? The real place where Signal absolutely shines. It's not an edge case. This is an actual threat that a lot of us do face to different degrees. It's sort of the stolen, snatched, forcibly unlocked, court order decrypted kind of device. Well, a court can order someone to unlock a phone, especially if they're using biometrics, right? We've talked about this on the channel before, biometric versus passphrase and what's better. And we can get into a whole separate discussion about that. There's no one perfect answer. Everyone's situation is different. But if someone steals your phone and it is, locked and closed, if the law enforcement takes your phone and they demand that you, quote, unlock the phone, or they get the carrier to unlock the phone if your phone is weak enough to do that. Maybe you don't have the latest generation of iPhone or Apple. If you haven't seen my buddy Joe Grand and his video on his channel about unlocking an old Samsung phone that had some crypto wallet on it, you should definitely check that out. He's a great guy. Well, again, Signal is protecting your data not just in transit, but at rest. They use the crypto extensions on the SQLite database that they have implemented. So if you are using Signal property, if it's a modern install, that data is encrypted on the device. It's not easily snatchable and readable out of the device if somebody grabs the device. Not to mention the fact that Signal supports, and here's a huge one here in a difference from SMS, Signal supports disappearing messages. Now, yeah, sure, if you have a bad actor that you're talking with and they are screenshotting deliberately everything you say, it's not the same protection. But good data hygiene is just good practice, it's wise practice, and Signal has deeply reduced the friction involved for your average casual everyday user to have disappearing messages. It's just kind of the norm on all my conversations in Signal. You can set it up to be the default for all your new chats. Just say, make sure all my chats are disappearing messages by default. And you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about, oh, if someone gets my phone years later, what about all those messages I was sending and all those friggin' pictures I was flirting with that person? They're not going to be saved on the phone if you had disappearing messages turned on, and you didn't have to worry about it. There's also a whole lot of implications with Signal that get into chain of evidence issues. So let's talk again, not about Signal. Let's talk about your regular cell phone calls and messages. Because Signal, most people I think use Signal more for text message-based communication than voice, although it does voice very clear. It does voice better than my voice calls, frankly. If you're just SMS texting with someone else, and that person, you don't know it, but maybe they're doing something illegal. Maybe they're manufacturing, I don't know, suppressors with solvent traps, and they get busted by the ATF, and the ATF looks through their phone. And they say, we got to know all the other people who ever said the word gun to this person in a text message. And the ATF looks through the phone and they see your number is in there and you're talking about guns and are we going to go shooting this weekend? And they say, we got to dig through this person's life. Well, the number that is communicating your number in their phone is probably your real cell phone number at that point, right? Because you're just texting. It's just a regular SMS. That instantly gives people a chain of evidence to follow, a trail to follow. They can say, okay, well, which mobile carrier has that number? Look it up. Whose name is tied to that account? Look it up. let's pull some SS7 data, let's get some, GPS data, let's find out where on the face of this earth that number is right now. They can immediately start building a trail to you. With Signal, you understand you don't have to use your phone number in Signal. Most people do, that's the most common way to do it. But if you have literally like your Grandma Mabel's landline, and that's on a desk and you're visiting Grandma for Thanksgiving, you can set up Signal with that phone number. And Signal will say, we have to verify the phone number now. We'll try to text you. Well, that's not getting a text. And you say, no, call me instead. And then a phone call, and you go, yep, hello? Oh yeah, my Signal verification code is blah. Now, your Signal device, your number in Signal, is actually a landline that's somewhere 6 states away. So if, again, if someone's messaging you and they get their phone confiscated, and even if the authorities or some threat actor looks at the phone and says, the Chinese government's like, oh, who has this person been saying anti-Chinese and pro-Taiwan things to? Oh, this guy, look up that number. Well, they're not going to get you. They're going to put Grandma Mabel under surveillance, I guess. If you really don't want to be a risk to your Grandma Mabel, you can use Signal without a phone number at all. You may have occasionally seen someone that is using Signal and it pops up on your interface. It's weird. It's just like a weird name. You can set up Signal without a phone at all. It's harder, but you can do it. I don't just use Signal with my techie hacker friends, right? It's with my family and my peers outside of the tech industry. My wife, Tara, she uses it with her family and all of her colleagues. The ease of use, the ease of encrypted communications, that is the real gift that Moxie and the Signal Foundations have given to the world. You may have heard of other tools out there that are chat apps that aren't SMS, right? There's WhatsApp, there's Telegram. Please don't use Telegram, Jesus Christ. We can talk about why later. You might have heard of WhatsApp a lot more, right? WhatsApp is very popular overseas. The Asian market, it's very big, it's very popular all around the world if you have international family and friends. Why is it so popular? Because it's easy. It's easy and free. It's cross-platform, and it's just smooth. It's turnkey. If you have to use WhatsApp, like let's say I've been staying in another country and I got to contact a host that I'm meeting there, and they say, oh, you have WhatsApp? Because they'll always say that in foreign countries. You don't have to give WhatsApp all of your information, by the way. There's a tool called WhatsApp Dialer, which if you don't know about WhatsApp, it really wants all your information. It wants to dig through your phone and get your contacts and everything. I don't give WhatsApp my contacts. You can use WhatsApp Dialer to sort of sideload a number in and be like, here, place a message to that user. And WhatsApp doesn't get your data. But normally, if I'm not traveling internationally, I just don't have WhatsApp installed. I have Signal installed because that's the main tool. That is the best tool, in my opinion. It is not mere security theater. It is a frictionless, pain-free way to make not just secure, but free and easy secure text messages, group chats, video calls, voice calls, and normalizing the use of encryption. Even if you don't have an incredible OPSEC need, there's great value to society in that, right? We may face a day where encryption is further pressured to be outlawed and undermined. It's a lot easier to do that if you're a politician and you're undermining the rights and the freedoms of a small group of people. If you're doing it to a large group of people, you're going to get a lot more pushback. And we've seen this with guns, right? The reason it's important to be public and enjoy firearms and talk about firearms, and I've often talked about how I'll always fly with my guns, even if I'm not going somewhere to go shoot, because I want to normalize people in airports just seeing, oh, that guy's flying with guns today. It's the reason, even if you don't live in an unsafe area, like getting your concealed carry and just concealed carrying every day. Why? Because it normalizes the idea that guns are a thing that are out there in the population. It's a lot harder for anti-gun politicians to suddenly take away the rights of a bunch of people if they're dealing with 50% of the people, not 5% of the people. So the same thing applies to encryption. And even if you don't fully understand everything I've said today or everything Carl and Robert and others have said on some of the other channels where it's been discussed, normalizing the use of encryption is healthy for a democratic society. And Signal, whether you understand all the things I've told you, is, in my opinion, the best way to do it. I encourage you to use Signal. It is not just a security theater magic smoke. It really makes it harder for you to be interfered with throughout a variety of different threat conditions, some of which may not apply to you, but one day some of them will. All right? Hope you enjoyed this. More content from Carl about things that go pew and bang later, but thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.